Hi everyone, Stacie Bloomfield here. Welcome to the second video of this series, where we are creating 3 pieces of art so that we can have artwork to pitch for licensing and to put on our own product. In the last video, I walked you through the design brief and showed you how to make thumbnail sketches to plan out your illustrations.
All right, so far let's recap what we've done. We've gone over our design brief and we have created thumbnail sketches of our ideas for our 3 pieces of artwork. P.S. If I didn't mention this before, a lot of times companies want to see thumbnail sketches of your work and ideas before you proceed with making the final work. It saves you time and it saves them time. So thumbnail sketches are an essential part of the creation process that I'd like you to learn to use if you feel comfortable with it. So after we learned the design brief and read it through, we started working on our main piece of art, our hero piece of art, which was our snowman. And after we created our snowman, I made mine in Procreate, but several of you are using Illustrator, you're hand drawing, you're using colored pencils, and that's fantastic. After that, we move on to making our secondary repeat pattern. So a lot of you may not be repeat pattern makers, surface pattern designers, that's okay. I'm here to show you how I make my repeat patterns. We're focusing on a holiday floral, and florals just sell, guys. Whether you like making flowers or not, every single fabric collection I've ever created, every collection I've made for textiles, I've always needed a little floral. So we're going to focus on that. And I'm going to show you how I make my repeat patterns going from Procreate to Adobe Illustrator. All right, so here we go. I'm going to show you how I make my repeat patterns. First, I start drawing in Procreate. I'm going to start with an 8x8" canvas, and I am literally going to draw all of my leafy elements. Now, you'll notice what I've done here is I've created like 3 different elements that I've drawn several different ways. So there is a little floral, there's a real line work focused leafy element, and then there are these berries with a little stem. Oh, and then there's that little loop-de-loop bigger, thicker stem. So I guess I have 4 elements here that I've drawn, and I draw them in multiple directions and in different weights. So the important thing here is that I don't have to have tons of things in my pattern, but if I can create several elements and use them over and over again in my repeat pattern, it's going to create visual interest. So then I want to show you that I draw everything layer by layer. So all of my colors are on the same layer. Everywhere that's green is on the layer 3. Everything that's red is on layer 2, and everything that is black is layer 1. So I've done this on my iPad, and I'm going to prepare to export these files to my computer for Adobe Illustrator. But before I do that, I'm going to change every layer color to black. You're going to see why in a second, but whenever I take these designs into Adobe Illustrator and I run them through Live Trace, if I do lighter colors like a light red or a light blue, sometimes the details get lost, so I always do it in black. I'm going to export by clicking Share, and I'm going to select Photoshop PSD, and I'm going to export it to my computer, Stacie's MacBook Pro. And after that, I'm going to pick this up in Adobe Illustrator. So now that I have my artwork exported, I'm going to open up a new canvas in Adobe Illustrator. I'm going to make an 8x8" canvas. I'm going to make sure that my 300 DPI is selected because that's the size we need our artwork to be at. And I'm going to open up that Photoshop file right into Illustrator. And as you'll see, all of that artwork is there in black and white. But the cool thing is by putting this into a Photoshop file first, before I send it to Adobe Illustrator, all of my layers are still there. So I'm going to go through this quickly. And if you're not familiar with Image Trace is a way to vectorize your artwork in Adobe Illustrator. It literally traces your work for you and makes it nice and smooth. So I'm going to go in layer by layer and I'm going to run Live Trace. The one thing I'll tell you quickly is that I always drop down the advanced menu and I click this little button that says Ignore White. And what that's going to do is it's going to trace my artwork, vectorize it, but it's going to remove the white background layer from each layer so that all I'm left with is the artwork to play with. And I'll show you how that looks as I progress. So this is going to take me a few minutes. There are a few things that you can do when you're doing Live Trace to adjust your artwork. You can add more paths or reduce the paths depending on how exact you want your tracing to be. You can reduce corners, you can reduce noise. You play around with those settings if you're using Adobe Illustrator to make sure that your artwork translates the way you want it to. So once all of these layers in black and white have been traced through Image Trace, I'm going to go over to the file, and it got cut off here with my screen recording. I'm so sorry, but at the top of the screen there is a button called Object. It's in the top menu, and I'm going to drop that down until I hit Expand. And I am going to expand all of these layers at once, and what that's going to allow me to do is move around the artwork. So once I expand them, I can grab the artwork and move it around, and watch, there's no white background whenever I move it off of the canvas. See? So cool! Before I do anything else, I'm going to select all of my layers, and I'm going to just scale them by grabbing the selection tool and then holding down the Shift key and pulling my selection tool out until my pattern designs are bigger. I want to work at a larger scale before I start building all of my repeat pattern elements. And then finally, my little shortcut is that I'm going to open my design brief, the one that I showed you. I'm going to take a quick screenshot of the color story, and I'm quickly going to place that into my Adobe Illustrator document. And I am going to open my swatches in Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to grab the eyedrop tool, and I'm going to just start eyedropping each color and dragging it to my swatch area, and boom, there's my red color, and my green, and my teal, and my navy, and my white. So there are all of my swatches that I need to work from. And finally, I'm going to select each layer because they're still in layers, and I'm going to grab them and I'm going to apply that swatch color. So everything that needs to be green is now green, everything that needs to be red is now red, and everything that needs to be navy is now navy. Woohoo! The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ungroup all of these pieces of artwork, because right now, if I select like that big thick leaf element on the left-hand side, it's going to move everything that is attached to that layer. So I'm going to go and I'm going to ungroup all of these items so I can move them freely. Now the fun part, building the pattern. So there's a standard principle that you need to know whenever you're making a repeat pattern. Any element that starts on the left-hand side must continue onto the right-hand side. Any element that starts on the top of your swatch must continue to the bottom of the swatch. This is going to give you a seamless pattern. So if right now you're like, wow, Stacie, this is really overwhelming, I want to show you how this looks like when I make it with a simple polka dot. This is going to make it feel a lot less intimidating, so I'm going to drop in this video that I recorded previously and show you how to make the repeat pattern with a polka dot. And then after you've watched that, we're going to come back here and you're going to watch me build my pattern. In this example, instead of using an 8 by 8 inch canvas, I use a 1000 pixel by a 1000 pixel canvas, but everything else is going to be exactly the same. So don't be confused if you hear me say pixel. So when you're making a seamless pattern, the most important thing is anything that's on the left-hand side of your artboard must repeat on the right-hand side, and anything on the top must be on the bottom, and vice versa. And the simplest way that I like to make sure that I grab everything on my artboard is I'll kind of just rubber band select on the left hand side and select those dots, and I'll copy and I'll paste in place. And then I'm going to again go to my properties tab, and I'm going to just add 1000 pixels at the end of the current point on the axis. And so I'll just do plus 1000, and it's going to move those copied circles over 1000 pixels for me, right? And then I'll move on and do that on the top as well. So select those circles, I'm going to copy, paste them in place, and then I'm going to go down to my y-axis and I'm just going to add 1000 pixels, and it's going to move those circles perfectly down on the bottom. So now I'm going to move all the rest of my internal artwork around that's on my artboard. I just want it to have better distribution, right? And if I were to move any of the circles that were on the left-hand side or on the top or the right or the bottom, I have to make sure that I move the corresponding circle. That way everything stays seamless. And whenever you're making a pattern, you just want to make sure that you move its buddy shape. So here's what's important next. So a lot of people make this mistake. They feel like they've laid out their artwork, it's going to be seamless, right? So they make their rectangle with the marquee tool and they select their swatch and they drag and drop all their artwork into the swatches panel and they try to fill a rectangle. And then, oops, there's all these little clear lines and people are like, why is that happening? Well, I'll tell you why. You actually have to take a rectangle that's the exact same size as your artboard, so in this case 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels, and it needs to be completely empty, and you're going to move that to the very back of your artboard. So for me, I just copied and pasted my red rectangle. I moved it to the back, send it back, and then I made sure it was empty. So now when I drag everything to my swatches tab, I can make a rectangle and I can fill it, and it is seamless. So now that I've shown you how to make a pattern using a simple polka dot, it's not going to feel as intimidating to watch me make my more busy secondary winter floral pattern. Essentially, I'm going to grab these elements and I am just going to put them all over my swatch, my 8x8 inch swatch, until I have filled the page and I like the way it looks. And the cool thing is I'm just repeating these elements over and over again. I'm just rotating it so that they look like they've been tossed a bit. So I'm going to fill in all of my edges left and right and fill in my center with all these cutesy little leaves and florals and berries until I am super happy with my layout. Now with this secondary pattern, we don't want to have a lot of white elements, a lot of white space. We want our spacing to be intentional. And this is more of a toss pattern where everything is evenly distributed. So I am just going to take my time, putting all of my elements where I want them. I am copying and pasting elements that I like and then rotating them. Copy, paste, rotate. Copy, paste, rotate. So all you have to do at this point is literally play with placement. Move things around until it feels real good. And once you have a placement that you like, you can go ahead and test your swatch. So before I test my swatch, I think I'm going to go ahead and add an aqua layer to a layer underneath my 3 layers of artwork. So I'm going to go over here and grab my little rectangle tool in the left hand column, and I'm going to click it and double click it, and I'm going to create an 8x8 inch rectangle, and I'm going to click OK. And instead of trying to drag it right perfectly center to my swatch, I'm going to go right back to that properties area, and I'm going to type in 4x4 while that rectangle is selected, and it's going to move it right center to the back of my swatch. Woohoo! The last thing you need to do before you test your swatch is we are going to copy and paste by selecting copy the aqua, and we're going to copy it and paste it. We're going to make it a clear fill, and we're going to put that new rectangle right behind that aqua rectangle. And then I can just use my selection tool, drag it all over the entire swatch. So everything's selected, and I'm going to drag it over to my swatches area. And then I'm going to grab my rectangle tool again, and I'm going to draw a new rectangle with my swatch selected. And look, I have a seamless repeat pattern. Doesn't that look awesome? But there's a few things I'm still going to finish out here to make it look perfect. I'm going to fill in a few empty spots that I see so that it feels nice and full. I'm going to keep adding a new layer of like white dots on top of my artwork, especially in those berries area to give it a little bit more depth. And once I'm done playing with all of that, I'm going to have a brand new swatch, a repeat pattern that I can use for my new holiday collection. So I hope that this hasn't overwhelmed you too much, but this is literally how I create my repeat patterns. I draw in my Procreate app, and then I put it into Adobe Illustrator. I used to draw by hand and scan those elements, so you can still do that if you don't have an iPad but you have Adobe Illustrator. Hand draw with pen and then scan it, or even take a photo of your artwork and import it into Adobe Illustrator. I also want to remind you that I have a lot of elements happening in my secondary pattern, but you don't have to have as many elements as I do. I've made lots of different secondary patterns over the years that are very, very simple, and I'm going to show you screenshots of those right now. Less can be more. As long as your pattern supports your hero illustration and uses the right color story, I think you're going to be just fine.
So that is how to take your second sketch, which is your secondary winter floral, and turn it into a repeat pattern. I hope that you're excited about this series. Don't forget to like this video and leave me a comment so I can answer your questions or update me on your progress.